Good afternoon and welcome back to Gulfstream Park. I'm Gabby Gaudette alongside Andy Serling, and welcome back to opening day here at the championship meet. It's an exciting day for sure of this Claiming Crown Day, and it's always really fun to get things kicked off, but what better way to get it kicked off with the Claiming Crown?
I agree. There's something about opening days at any racetrack, that you have any kind of fondness for. They're the days that you sort of wait for during the year. And opening day at Gulfstream has always been one of the most exciting days of the year. And wherever you're playing, it just takes so much of the focus into Gulfstream Park during the winter. As you say, the Claiming Crown, it brings together horses from all over the place.
Absolutely, and it's going to be an interesting card as well. And just to kind of quickly talk about some of our new wagers, we do actually start race one with two new wagers. One is the Rolling Super High 5, $1 wager, and the early pick 5. Those are two kind of interesting new wagers this championship meet.
Yeah, and the pick fives have gotten so much popularity as far as multi-race bets, and they're such a great value play in general because as the races progress, you're going to get more and more value for your dollar, and it's something that's just become hugely popular, and to have two of them during the day just makes it more fun.
Yeah, you can carry it on to the late pick 5, but before we get to the late pick 5, race 6 does start the 10-cent rainbow, or the 20-cent rainbow pick 6, and that's always a very fun wager here as well. Very popular, and I'm interested to get it kicked off today, as well as we do have that late pick 5 in race 7. Unfortunately, we are off the turf for races 1, 5, and 8 today, but we still stay on for two really key races, the third race and the 10th race. So let's get right into the action here, Andy. Race 1 does kick us off, a nice maiden special weight on the main track, 1 mile and a 16th, and a reminder there, we do go to the first finish for race 1.
Yeah, it's situation. It'll be interesting to see how they play it, because right now the 10 is a heavy favorite, but obviously there's a lot more money to come into the pool. And the 10 Giant Run, who I've got on top, I'm not sure who your selections are in this race, but is a horse that ran against significantly better horses, even in the dirt races. The turf race is clearly better, and the horse is better bred for turf. But finishing just behind Sail Ahoy, but also showing speed in that race, was a race that basically collapsed two back, and Giant Run's probably the horse to beat in here. I do wonder, though, if by post time, if the Todd Pletcher factors come into effect, and the 16 Stradivari is going to end up being, if not the favorite, very close.
Yeah, you look at Stradivari to the outside. He does have to draw from that outside post position, but he is coming out of a strong race at Aqueduct. That 7 furlongs now stretching out to 2 turns. But Stradivari as well comes out of the race behind Vorticity, who actually ran very well. And some of the horses who Vorticity ran against, including Awesome Speed, who I'm familiar with at Laurel, has run very well as of late. Obviously, he went on to win the James F. Lewis at Laurel. So some really productive races. I think that that horse to the outside should be well bet. But I, too, landed on the 10 Giant Run. I like his early natural speed, and he seems like a horse that just continues to progress with distance here, and he should be able to have tactical advantage.
Right, and also Stradivari's got post 9 in this race, which obviously isn't that bad, but it's still pretty far outside where you've got 8, 7, 6, 5. So you've got Giant Run's got post 4, so he's going to have a real advantage with speed. Now, one thing about Stradivari's race he's coming out of in New York, that was a race that was completely dominated on the front end. Veracity was a second-time starter, went right to the lead in there, and Wheels Up Now was a heavy favorite for West Point that ran second. So it did compromise Stradivari, but I think it's going to be very interesting, and this will come up in the second race today. Todd Pletcher, and it's not exactly a secret that unlike his usual years where he's been so dominant, especially with 2-year-old colts leading into Gulfstream and all the big 3-year-old races, as well as really anywhere in the East Coast and the country, he's got nothing so far with his 2-year-old colts. The question is, does he have a sort of second batch that's going to run better down here, or is he going to continue this trend? And I think that's important in the second race. But Stradivari, he's not the typical Todd Pletcher kind of 2-year-olds we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, maybe nothing has popped up yet, but he might have a second batch of 2-year-olds, or he could have late developing 2-year-olds going into the 3-year-old season as well.
We'll see in the second race.
We shall see in the second race. We'll turn our attention to the second race. Another maiden special weight on the main track at 6 furlongs, scratch the 1 Louise in here. We have a few first-time starters, one of them being the 7 Zulu for Todd Pletcher, who's been really clocking an impressive work tab out in the morning at Palm Beach Downs.
Yeah, they paid $900,000 this horse, the 2-year-old, and it is sort of hard to imagine when you pay that kind of money back in March that they can't run. The 2-year-old sales are a little bit, they can be dicey at times. I have to feel like if he's debuting this horse on opening day, it's hard to imagine it can't run, but it didn't feel a little bit even like last year where some of those odds-on Todd Pletcher 2-year-olds, or now 3-year-olds, soon-to-be 3-year-olds, didn't win with the frequency which is one of the reasons I didn't mind taking a small shot against this horse, because I always feel like experience counts for a lot in these races. And the two horses with experience, both the 6 Grand Nanuco and the 10 Gold Shark, are horses that ran a little bit in their races. And for me, Grand Nanuco was in a maiden race on Travers Day at Saratoga, which in general, guys are going to point their better 2-year-olds for those races. It was also a race that completely collapsed. Riverdale finished second, came from way back. The winner was a stalker, Tail of Sabal. They made outside moves in there, and Grand Nanuco was dueling towards the inside, and I think ran better than it might look in there. And I'm going to give this horse a shot in the experience with the full acknowledgement that Todd might just have the goods.
Yeah, and you look at that horse as well, Grand Nanuco. You look at kind of his work pattern since his debut effort, and it looks like he's continuing to improve there, at least in the morning, working a 36-2 there most recently. But Zulu, you look at the breeding, he's bred to be a good one by Bernardini out of the Summer Squall Mare Temperata. 5 out of the 11 foals that she's actually produced have won in their 2-year-old season. So the precocity is in the bloodlines there, and this one might just be the goods. But there's another horse. We have a first-time starter, the 5 Spin Tall, first-time starter for Ralph Nix. Interesting statistic here for trainer Ralph Nix. Over the past 2 years with 2-year-old first-time starters at dirt sprints alone, he wins at a 33% win clip, and not to mention finishes 71% in the money. So you never know what's going to happen with these first-time starters, but I do like this horse's breeding, and obviously the statistic speaks for himself for Ralph Nix.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Ralph Nix firsters, and one of the things I'm always careful with firsters, depending on obviously the operation, are homebreds. And Spin Talk is a homebred. Listen, Spin Talk might be a big price in here, and as you say, Ralph Nix is insane. He's really as good as anybody with first-time starters. And he's had a very good run at Gulfstream where he won a successive races in a short period of time. This one's a homebred from a dam that really wasn't much of a runner as a first foal. We'll see. I thought that the 9 horse might be kind of interesting for Jorge Navarro, Sharp Azteca, a horse that cost $220,000 at the sale. I was pretty impressed with the 2-year-old workout video. Now, they can be a little deceiving, and I'm not exactly great at watching those, but this horse looked very, very good and worked 10 and 1/5 extremely easily.
So we shall see with some of those first-time starters. Interested to see them in the paddock this afternoon as well. We'll move on to the 3rd race, the Claiming Crown Tierra, going a mile and a 16th on the turf course. The rail has changed to 108 feet here.
Yeah, we're on the turf. Obviously the question, they're running well out in the course, and the general feeling is that that part of the course is the one that's going to be the best part to be on. So we'll see, and it's listed as good, and we'll see how they handle the turf, and it's always a factor. It feels like there's supposed to be a reasonably fast pace in here with the 1 Big and Toasty going to the front end, and that could compromise the 10 Quiet Kitten a little bit. Ira Ortiz, who's riding this horse, is not a very aggressive rider, but you can't restrain this horse that much. And it feels like probably the horse to beat that you and I are taking a shot against could be a little compromised by the pace dynamic.
I agree with you. I'm going to the outside here with Seeking Treasure for trainer Doug Matthews. This horse has back form as well, but last time out, I remember watching this race live, and even again going and watching the replay last time out, and she was just very unusually far back for going 2 turns on the turf. She was going a mile and a 16th. Yes, it was going against starter $25,000 company, but the filly who actually won that race, Day Marquis, she's been in fantastic form for Sagamore Farm. You go to her back form too when she was going 2 turns. She was relatively closer to the pace. So I do think the connections were kind of upset with the outcome of the race, all considering that she had to make up a tremendous amount of ground at the top of the stretch. Now today with that outside post, the only thing she can do is kind of be aggressive out of the gate and maybe get a nice position early.
Well, we'll see if she can get that position. I thought her last race was a step back for her off her previous 2 efforts were extremely good. Mike Maker's got 4 horses in here, and it feels like look, a lot of guys are pointing to the Claiming Crown, obviously. The purses are very good. They know these races are coming up, but Mike Maker's a guy that's experienced doing it. He's done it with the Ramseys. And I felt like the logical one of his horses might be Jester and Me with Julian Leperoux, who another horse whose last race, a little like your horse, is not as good as her prior efforts. Whereas the 9 Rock Me Mama is just one of these horses I have a bit of a thing for. Mike Maker has dramatically improved this horse since claiming her. She has been a completely different animal. Now, one of the things he had found some success with her was going longer on the turf. And sometimes they're better because of the distance, but she really was always a horse that was a little better going shorter on the dirt. And I'm hoping that she can get back to her good races. Her last race was very good. She'll be a bit of a price, and there should be some pace in here. And maybe the mile and a 16th will suit her a little bit more than those longer distance races. And I just want to kind of take a shot with her to price. These races, I don't know, Gabby, they're so competitive that it feels like you need to find some prices in these races because we were talking about it last night. It's going to be very hard to come up with real winners in these races, and you're almost better off finding some prices and maybe fooling around and try supers
Yes.
wherever and getting them in somewhere, and you can be smart without being particularly right.
I agree with you. And you look at the full fields here, and all of these horses are well evenly matched, and that's what you get with kind of the structure of a Claiming Crown type of day. And, you know, like you said, it's important to maybe shop for some prices, throw them into some exotics. The 11 Seneca Destiny is one that I'm going to be throwing in the mix. First off, the claim for Brad Cox. He always does very well with that angle. And the blinkers come off, and I've watched this filly's past performances over the past few starts, and she has this really interesting high head action, and she's a little bit keen going into the first turn as well. So now, first off the claim, they make this immediate equipment change, and I think it's going to be able to settle her a little bit kinder. Luis Saez gets the call as well.
I think Brad Cox is a real trainer for people to keep an eye out on. He came to Saratoga, he won races. It's very difficult to ship in these meets, and he's a guy who is capable. If he ships horses down here, he's going to win. Both the 8 Wild Suave, who actually won, who was third in this race last year, and the 11 Seneca Destiny have been claimed from Mike Maker in their last starts. And Mike Maker has the best stats of any trainer I've ever seen as far as claiming horses on the turf. But when you claim horses from Mike Maker on the turf, they're winning at a 10% clip, and the ROI is not good. I'm concerned about that, and that's one of the reasons both the 11 and 8 horses that have a chance in here, I'm just worried about horses that are claimed from Mike Maker. It's tough to get them to keep their form, and it's very hard to improve them.
That's a great statistic there. We'll go on to the 4th race on the card, the Claiming Crown Iron Horse, a mile and a 16th on the main track. And we have 2 Cuban Brothers U has been really running a hole through the wind as of late here, and he's looking to make it 3 in a row. His only off form was against Restricted Company on Governor Day, in the Governor's Day there at Delaware. And, you know, John Rigateri, since the claim, this horse has really been in fantastic form. Today he has to draw the rail. He is tactical enough, and not to mention if we do have any bit of moisture in the track, I think that's going to even benefit him more.
No, I agree, and I think we have some footage actually of his last race at Laurel. Maybe we can take a look at that. And what's interesting about him is he is a horse who is probably best on the front, but he can rate a little bit. But don't you just feel like in this race, he's got to go. He's got the rail. It's such an advantage in these mile and 16th races. And the only thing that concerns me a little bit about him is coming down to Gulfstream for the first time. He's been at Tampa for a while, so he's been acclimated to Florida. But he's coming out of races where he was 30 cents to a dollar, 70 cents to a dollar, 40 cents. These are better horses than the ones he's been facing, so I'm wondering if he could be a little bit vulnerable, but he's the horse to beat.
He is the horse to beat, and coming out of that Delaware race there on the good track at Laurel 2 starts back, again, I was teetering, trying to go against him that day, trying to find someone to beat him, but he was just purely much the best in those 2 races. He was going against $5,000, whatever, $10,000 claimers, and he's going to have to step up to the plate today, but I do think he could have that tactical advantage. Drawn from that inside, just go. I agree with you. This horse is rateable. Obviously, he has that positional speed, but from that rail post position, I think he could really dictate this race here. There's another horse that we should mention that could perhaps shake things up, the 6 Saturday Special for George Navarro. He's coming out of a race. I used him in the exacta. The reason why I didn't use him to try to beat 2 Cuban Brothers U is because he finished a couple lengths behind Tucker's Point. That horse, obviously, he went on to win a nice starter at Delaware next out, but he really didn't hold form, stepping up to a little bit tougher company at Laurel in the past 2 starts. So I don't know. It's a little bit shaky, but if he can get to his back form, he very well could upset the favorite.
It's one of these situations almost like we were talking about in the turf race, where you take a horse who's coming off of his race, or her race, and it's not necessarily as good as the ones prior to it. And I did take Saturday Special, hoping Jorge Navarro has waited 3 months for this race, because this horse wasn't terrible last time, but was nowhere near his good form. And you do have to be concerned. Now, he's not going to be the favorite. I have to think 2 Cuban Brothers U is going to be the favorite down the inside, and I'm hoping that Zayas can get a little bit of position. The 7 Palatine Hill is really the only horse in here that can keep 2 Cuban Brothers U honest. Not to say the horse can't rate, but I think the advantage to the favorite is the speed. So if the 7 can go with that horse, perhaps it can help Saturday Special, because the prior races at Monmouth Park would make him very tough in here.
I agree. The 2 Runs with Bulls is another one for Peter Walder. Gets this horse for the first time, and he's been obviously clocking some workouts here since that October freshening. at Gulfstream, so he's got kind of the home court advantage. Peter Walder always dangerous in this spot as well. He might just be a touch below the other two that we did mention, though.
It'll be interesting because there's a few horses coming from Thistledown. I mean, one of the fun things about a day like today is all these horses coming from different tracks. But one of the things that makes it tougher to handicap is you just aren't sure which tracks you're going to be able to get the form to come down here. Now, in general, it feels like shippers will do okay. Sometimes some trainers do better than others. This is Loose Racing Stables, another outfit that's very sharp, that's pointing for these races. Peter Walder has excellent numbers. First-time trainers, he's like 24% with over a 214 ROI with first time as a trainer on the dirt. So there's no reason horse can't run. And getting that post and Javier, you know he's going to get a good ground and saving trip.
Absolutely. Race 5 here, moving on to the Claiming Crown Distaff Dash. We are off the turf on the main track at 5 furlongs and have a couple of scratches in here, but I do land on the 7 Forest Funds for Ramon Preciado. You look at this horse's back, this filly's back form here as well on the main track. She just got the speed of the speed, I think. She has that advantage of the early pace in here, and that's kind of why I went with her. Obviously, the 6 Silver Sachet, she has a lot of speed on the turf, but does that always transition to the main track?
In general, I actually like off-the-turf races because the reality of off-the-turf races, especially when they sometimes happen midday, and it's going to happen at some point down here in the winter when you get these pop-up storms, people bet the wrong horses. They'll bet horses based on turf form when they should be betting horses based on dirt form. And I think you make a great point about a horse like the 6, who's obviously good on the turf, but the dirt form is inferior. This is also a horse that Kirk Saidi had. I agree with you on Forest Funds, who feels like she has the best dirt form in here. Now, I have a pick 5 ticket, which I know we want to go over before we end this race. The pick 5 obviously ends in here. I thought the 8 Estrada's, this is race 5, and I feel as though those are not my picks. Feel as though my picks for this race should be 7, 8, 14. Were you 7, 6, 14?
Yes, 7, 6, 14.
So they're picking on me, and they're putting up your off-the-turf picks. The 8 Estrada's Girl, that's a horse that's actually got some back dirt races that aren't that bad. And even her last effort was good. And she goes to Mike Trombetta, who obviously a good trainer that you're familiar with. Yeah,
and this mare, has really impressed me in the past couple of starts. You know, at Laurel, especially on the turf, you draw the rail. That post position just loses all the time. It's very, very hard at 5.5 furlongs at Laurel to win from that rail post position, especially if you kind of have that middle of the pack type of speed. Obviously, she goes to the main track today, but she's really held her form from her turf sprints to her dirt sprints as well. Mike Trombetta ships her down, and we were actually talking about this yesterday too, about horses from northern weather kind of acclimating to South Florida weather, but it really hasn't been that cold. I don't think they're really in for a big shock or a big surprise when they're shipping south here.
It'll be interesting because you say it's been in the 50s and you've been a little bit warmer, fortunately, because you spent a lot of time outside while I'm hiding inside. The most interesting thing that'll happen all winter is whether or not Gabby picks every horse that comes from Laurel, and I pick every horse that comes from New York throughout the winter. You want to quickly go over that pick 5 I've got that starts in race number 1? I think we have a ticket for that. I'm looking to play a pick 5 that's going to be an $81 play for 50 cents, using in the first race the 3, 10, and 16, the second race the 6 and 7, the third race the 4, 9, 10, the fourth race the 1, 2, and 6, and the fifth race, the 7, 8, and 14. That'll be my early pick 5 play.
Okay, speaking of the early pick 5, we also have a late pick 5 today and the 20-cent Rainbow pick 6. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Rainbow 6 sequence up next. Welcome back to the morning show here at Gulfstream Park, and we're going to take a look at the 20-cent Rainbow Pick 6 races 6 through 11 this afternoon. And it's interesting sequence, obviously, now that some of the races are off the turf onto the main track, but I still think the races still do stay pretty intact here. We'll take a look at that ticket here just now, using 4 horses here in the sequence to start it off. I think this is an interesting race. Obviously, we do have Treble Kid in this particular event, who should go off as a short price, and Stall Walking Dude, 2 horses who are coming out of the DeFrancis Dash here. We have have the 11 Grand Shores, who was a winner last year in this particular event. And I'm using a long shot in here, the 3 Rockin' On By. I'll get to him in a second. I know you think I'm just playing favoritisms here with the Laurel horses.
I don't think you are. I know you are. It's just very clear what's going on.
Okay, well, I'll be the lady at the window cashing the big tickets here.
You will be the only one at the window actually cashing the ticket with Rockin' On By wins.
Race 7 here, just using 2 horses, the 6 and the 13. And as we get down, I really couldn't find a single, especially with some of the races off the turf. I really do like race 10, Roman Approval to 1, but backing myself up with the 4 horse, a nice Peter Walder horse here as well, using 2 horses in the final leg of the sequence, $76.80. Let's get into the first leg of the sequence here, Andy. 7 furlongs on the main track for the Rapid Transit, and I thought this race came up really, really good this year.
It really did. It's basically a graded stake masquerading as a claiming crown race. I mean, it's an excellent race, and I think you have to start out by showing a replay of the DeFrancis Dash that you ran up at Laurel, and really it's always been one of the biggest races of the year up at Laurel, and a terrific race. It's a race the Troubled Kid won, but he got justifiably disqualified in there. He absolutely cut horses off in the backstretch. And Stalwalking Dude, who finished 4th in that race, to me, Stalwalking Dude is probably the more interesting of the two, because Troubled Kid has got to get the 7 furlongs. If he does, he's going to win. He's better than these. But he's got to deal with Classic Salsa down the inside and his speed, which could soften him up. My question with Stalwalking Dude for you, Gabby, is why was the jockey as aggressive as he was last time? And does the fact that he was on the inside and he was dueling more for the lead at the beginning, did that compromise him later? And is he going to get more pace and a less aggressive ride today, which could easily help him turn the tables?
I very well could. You get faster horses in here as well, the 9 Trouble Kid, and as you mentioned, Classic Salsa. And at this particular distance, at the 7 furlongs, he kind of has to take back and just let the speed go in front of him. And he could get a more preferred setup today. But Trouble Kid, you know, I know there's a couple of questions. Will he like the added distance of the 7/8? I don't think he's going to have an issue. You go back to the DeFrancis Dash, as you said, he was rightly so disqualified. You can't bounce around horses on the backside like that. But at the same time, was he much the best? Was he the clear-cut winner? And I do think he was.
I totally agree with you. I'm a little worried he's going to get softened up. And your second choice, Leticall, I think is very interesting here. And also, I feel like the main contenders, the 7, 8, 9, 11, I'm going to get back to Stalwalking Dude in a minute, are the players here. And you know what? Trouble Kid's much the worst to beat. I want to take a small shot against him, the distance, the other speed. And to me, the best price is going to be Leticall. Obviously, Grand Shores can win here. He won this race last year. This is a tougher race than last year. So I'm going to prove that I'm not only not the homer that you are, but I also don't want the trainers from New York to think that they're going to come down here and not get picked on me when they come down here like I pick on them in New York. So my friend David Jacobson, I'm going to point out to you that David Jacobson, coming down to Gulfstream over the last 5 years, he's 0 for 17. And I think that's something that's worth pointing out, especially when we talk about people shipping down here. And David Jacobson and Rudy Rodriguez, who both have major players here, have not had the kind of success down here they enjoy in New York and other places.
Yeah, and we'll actually talk about Royal Posse, obviously, later in the card with Rudy Rodriguez. And really interesting statistics, because you see these particular trainers, Rudy Rodriguez, David Jacobson, they're just powerhouses up in the New York circuit. But when they ship down, some of the horses just don't hold form. So I'm interested to see how Stalwalking Dude kind of holds his form. Real quick, the 3 Rockin' On By. Why I think he might even hit the superfecta here is because this is a really improving horse. Are his numbers good enough to compete with horses like Trouble Kid? No. Stalwalking Dude, probably not. But I do really like his last race, and his race 2 starts back. Majestic Hussar was a horse who just narrowly beat him. He kind of got a late run into the top of the stretch there. Majestic Hussar obviously winning at a big price there, but going on to finish second in the Fabulous Strike behind Favorite Tail. So that horse has actually kept very good form outside of that race against Graded Stakes Company. So perhaps maybe a nice long shot to use underneath.
I'm not knocking long shots. It's only going to make me look even worse.
Okay, we'll move on to the 7th race here, and this does start the late pick 5. I believe you do have a ticket here, Andy, and the 7th race, the Glass Slipper at the 1-turn mile on the main track.
I do have a ticket in the pick 5. I'm going to use the 6 and 7 to start this race out. I just feel like I want to spread in some others, and to keep it at $72, I feel like they're the right 2 horses in here. Ace and Provence, I'm a little bit worried about this horse getting the distance. I feel like the 7's a little, coming in from Thistledown once again, but has handled the distance before. I'm hoping they're the right 2 horses. Primo V is the other horse, but I use 6, 7. I'm using 9 and 14 the second leg. We'll get to that race. 1, 4, 12, 1, 9, 10, 1, 8, 10, 11. Like to get alive and have 4 horses in the last race. We'll see.
All right, well, we're going to have to get through the first leg. I like the 6X in Provence here as well. You look at her effort in the Maryland Million Distaff starter handicap, and she was obviously, those were the top two fillies and mares in the race, Lionhearted Lady and X in Provence, and they held form against the rest. What did they beat behind that? It wasn't really much, but you're questioning kind of the added distance of the one-turn mile. I think this mare has enough kind of positional speed here. She doesn't have to be too far off the pace at the one-turn mile that she should be able to transition her form from the 7/8 to the one turn.
It also is a race that's supposed to have a fast pace. I like to look at the time form US pace projector to get a feel for the race and how the speed's going to develop. And the feeling is the 10 Elusive Harmony should be setting a fast pace in here, and there are other speeds to be behind it. And both horses, the 6 and 7, are supposed to have good enough position they can benefit from that. And they feel like the right two horses, maybe on paper.
Yeah, we could even see the 13 Concealed with a Kiss. I think she's going to probably shake things up on the front end here as well. But I actually like the fact that she draws to the outside, because we do have supposedly a projected fast pace in here, but she should be able to dictate things from the outside. So I'm using her in the mix as well. You're only going 6-7 there in the first leg of the pick 5. We'll move on to the 8th race here, the Claiming Crown at Canterbury. 5 furlongs on the main track, taken off the turf onto the main track. And I still stick with my top selection, and that's the 9 Delta Bluesman here for Jorge Navarro. I do think that he's going to be the speed of the speed, and I actually even kind of like him a bit better coming onto the main track. Last time he was on the main track was in the Teddy Drone, and that was a very tenacious performance, quite honestly. He was 13-1 in that event. At the top of the stretch, or kind of mid-stretch, there was just a cavalry charge of horses, and he really dug in on the inside, dueling against other two horses, obviously, to get third by a head.
You're talking about a horse the last time it ran in the dirt, finished in a photo behind Stall-Walking Dude, who might win a much tougher 7-furlong race earlier today, and Wildcat Red, who's a stakes horse. I mean, these horses, with all due, this is a very nice field, but coming off the turf, if this horse, Delta Bluesman, can run back to those forms, and really there are only speeds in this race signed on, and it's 5 furlongs, so it's not like they can't go quickly early and quickly late, is Noble Prince. So it feels like he has a tactical advantage in general, and if he can run back to that dirt form, he's going to beat these horses.
Absolutely, and he's so fast early at the 6 furlongs or even shorter that I think the 5 furlongs is going to be right up his alley, whereas some of these horses, you know, maybe the 5.5, 6 furlongs might be more preferred, but he's so naturally quick that even if they do go fast early, as you said, I think he can follow through at the end. The interesting horse here is the 14 Officer Griffin. You know, his turf sprint form was kind of questionable going against these, but now run on the main track, that's a feather in the cap. You have to put this horse in the mix.
I totally agree. I have to think that Joe Sharp is probably happy this race came off the turf. It's not as though this horse had no chance on the turf, but this is a much better horse. I think there was a case where probably 2 things happened. A, it was the race that he could run in here, and also he was thinking, you know, there's rain coming, and if this race comes off the turf, I have a real chance to win. Officer Griffin, he's probably outside the 9, the one who benefits the most. And
you look at the 6 All-Star Red, an interesting one for Michelle Nihe. You look at his kind of off-track form. I don't know how the main track's going to be by the time we get to race 8. It's kind of windy here, obviously, but we look at this horse's back form, and he finished just a length behind Hebronville, who obviously was in very good form over the course of the summer, winning against Grade 3 Company and the Jersey Shore. And he was just a few strides behind Treble Kid. So if he can repeat a performance like that today on the main track, he should be in the mix as well.
He's another that benefits from it going to the dirt, I think. And also, as a 3-year-old, he might be one that has more room to improve than really anybody else in this race.
Absolutely. Race 9 up next here, the Claiming Crown Express, 6 furlongs on the main track. And we have the 4 Slana Wally here for Mike Maker. I'm going in the direction of this horse. I do think that you have to respect the 12 Lover Bill for Jorge Navarro. He was the winner of the Express last year. Going against him, though, he kind of has to draw that outside post position. I think this is going to be a perfect setup for the 4 in here.
Yeah, another problem with Lover Bill is that his last 2 races are so significantly subpar for him that you're expecting him to get back to it and not going to be a huge price. Now, obviously, he's got Jorge Navarro, so he's got that in his corner. But off his last 2 races, I think he's very, very questionable. Yeah, he was facing better horses, but you look at speed figures, they're slower races than his other races, particularly if you're looking at the Buyers. As far as Slanabalia, I have a thing for this horse. I have a concern about him as well. Wet tracks are tricky because a Gulfstream wet track can be completely different than a Laurel or a Belmont or a Saratoga, and all these tracks, they have their different quirks. And it feels like Slanabalia, who handled some moisture in the track down at Delaware Park, has in general, especially if we get more rain, has not been good on wet tracks. So that's a concern. I also love this horse, so I saw him in, and I basically said to myself, I know I'm going to lose money on this horse. The question is, can I find a way to defend him? And I think one of the ways to defend him is he clearly feels like a horse. The Ramseys, as much as anybody, are claiming horses with this day in mind.
Yes.
And he clearly feels like a horse that was claimed to Saratoga that day with this day in mind. They want to race at Keeneland, but they really want to win here.
Absolutely. I mean, they claimed this horse for $25,000. They protected him, well positioned him against that starter $7,500 company, and are pointing him for this. And you always have to like that they have a plan intact and they follow through with that. So I like him in here as well. The one, Alfredo Romana, he's got the speed from the rail, but I don't think that the 2, Blings Express, is going to be too far off of him as well. I threw Alfredo Romana in the mix just because this is a horse that, he's looking to take on 5 in a row, but he's been heavily favored in the past couple of starts. They've been against decent company here. It's just that rail post with some pressure to his outside concerns me.
It's also a rider that we're not that familiar with, and he's got the speed, and he's got to get him out of the gate. It's like you're sitting in the gate, you go in first, you're waiting to break, he's got to get him out. And also the thing that bothers me about him, and clearly he can win, I've got him second, you've got him third, is his best race far and away was at Suffolk. I wouldn't have wanted to be, and maybe the figure makers are going to argue with me, but both Beyer and the Timeform US ratings had this race rated very fast, but so significantly faster than his other races that it's hard for me not to think they ran a few days at Suffolk. How much can I really trust those figs? And I think you look at the other races, and he kind of fits, but that glaring 95 sticks out at you, and I just don't know if you can rely on him to run that number today.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he did hold form coming out of that race at Parks, but that was arguably against much lesser company when he dropped for the starter 8,000. I mean, there were a couple horses who did win outside of that race next out, and off the freshening here, you would imagine that he's going to be very aggressive coming out of the gate today.
He is. Listen, he may well win this race. He might just run them off their feet.
He could. All right, race 10, we'll move on to the Claiming Crown Emerald on the turf, rail set at 108 feet at 1 mile and a 16th.
Yeah, this is a very, very hard race in general, and I know that you really like Roman Approval, and you want to talk about the trouble that he had in his last race, and I agree he had trouble, but as we show it, the thing I wanted to ask you about is, was it trouble for a horse that was getting a perfect trip, and yeah, encountered a little bit of trouble, but overall, did a lot of things go very well for Roman Approval that day? And is he a horse with great company lines like the Pizza Man, the big horse is very good? Is he a horse that's better going longer, even though he can win at this distance?
I think he can win at this distance, but going back, we'll take a look at that last replay there against starter 25 company here. And obviously he's coming down the stretch. He gets into a little bit of trouble just prior to that, actually. And he has to check. He's down on the inside, and he gets covered up. He bumps around with first call in there. He has to check back. The thing that I liked about this race, though, was that he was down on the inside, he checked, then he had to come all the way outside. The horse to his inside, the number 8 horse, he finished very strongly, Ghost Hunter, who he's going to have to face once again here today. He got the ground-saving position coming out of the turn down the stretch here, whereas Roman Approval had to overcome some trouble and go wide. So I can see your argument here, but I do think that some of the trouble that he experienced was
it was legit. It was legit trouble. Yeah. I picked him second. It's not like I'm against him. I think it's just a point of discussion. We want to leave some time so we can at least talk about the final race. And I see Larry's getting very excited about the changes. So he's out there. This is like, I feel like I'm back in Saratoga. I thought the 10 Key to Power might just be the best horse in this race. And I'm hoping he gets enough pace to run into in here to get it done. Key to Power is a horse. His last race was that odd race they ran in the middle of a rainstorm. He didn't even run that badly against better horses. And that win time before that, beating Aztec Brave, who came back and ran well at Aqueduct, he overcame some slow paces in that race to still win, and he's going to get more pace today. I feel like Key to Power may be the logical horse. I just think he's the horse to beat.
Okay, we'll move on to the 11th and final race on this Claiming Crown card, the Jewel, the headliner of today's events, 1 mile and an 1/8 on the main track. And I think we both go with horses that are coming out of the same race. You go in the opposite direction, I stay with the 9 Indicott, and we do have some video spotlight replay of that last race. November 1st, obviously at Laurel, was kind of a win-in-your-in day at Laurel. Horses entered there pointing for the Claiming Crown here today. You land on the 1, Lieutenant Chanio.
Well, the reason I went Lieutenant Shawnee O is he thought it was chasing 3-4 wide the whole way around the racetrack, and the others were saving more ground. So not only did he cover more ground in this race and finish the wire together, there's two reasons I like him besides that. Now he gets the inside post, the big advantage at 1.125 here, and the others are drawn towards the outside. So he's completely turned the advantage around way in his favor. But also, Mike Maker, since this horse, who I've always thought had ability, he's really improved things a lot since he's gone to Mike Maker, and I think could be a very, very dangerous horse point for here, and he drew perfectly.
See, you say that he was chasing from the outside, whereas I think Endicott kind of was a blue-collar horse in that race. He was down on the inside. He took pressure the entire way throughout, and he still finished very gamely, whereas I thought Lieutenant Shawnee O had really every opportunity at the top of the stretch to kind of bypass the horses to the inside, and Mr. Palmer, obviously, and Endicott were just a little bit more gritty to the inside. We very well could see him turn the tables, though.
It'll be interesting. The key to this race is what you do with the 11 horse in here, Royal Posse, because on the surface of things, and I'm going to be nice the first day and pick Laurel horses, but I got kind of a New York Laurel horse, and I'm going to bet against horses from New York. Royal Posse's the horse to beat in here. He ran sensationally in the Empire Classic. That was a race that featured a huge pace that completely melted down. Empire Dreams took full advantage of it. He was right off of the fast pace, and he still continued on and finished well. The problem I have with this horse is shipping down here immediately, coming down to warmer weather, and you can see it in Rudy Rodriguez's numbers, which are tremendous in New York. He does well shipping to Maryland, but he's just 1 for 24 with a 33-cent ROI over the last 5 years at Gulfstream. And to me, on a favorite, that's something a horse you must use in pick 5s, pick 6s, pick 4s, whatever, but you're supposed to bet against in the race.
I agree with you. I think there's tons of value in that race, and we'll see what kind of a key race that race is with Mr. Palmer, Endicott, and Lieutenant Shawnee O here as well. But again, 11 races, 11 great races on tap. Once again, we do have a couple of races off the turf, but races 3 and 10 do stay on the turf. And that's a wrap for us here. Thank you for joining us here on the morning show at Gulfstream Park. And we're going to take a quick break, and Larry Colmus will be back shortly with Scratches and Changes. Good luck.